What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's Game Week 28 transfer tips, and we're going to start off by talking about Ben Chilwell, who's very popular this week, and I am someone that's thinking about bringing him into my own team. Done really well in the last couple of game weeks, so 1 goal, 1 assist, and 1 clean sheet too. So in game weeks 26 and 27 combined, he's got 18 points, right? So pretty decent, and I think the fixtures in the short to the medium term definitely have potential for defensive and attacking return. So in blank game week 28, it's Everton at home. In 29, it's Villa at home and Liverpool at home. So whether or not they would get 2 clean sheets in those games, probably not, because I think Villa and Liverpool are capable of scoring. But while Chelsea are playing with a wing-back system, Chilwell is a completely different prospect from an FPL point of view and much more chance of attacking returns than when he plays as a left-back. So if over the next 3 matches in the next 2 game weeks, they only get kind of 1, maybe 2 clean sheets, you've also got to add the potential for attacking returns on top of that, which makes him such a good prospect right now. Then it's Wolves away in 30 and Brighton at home in 31. So over the next 4 game weeks, there's 5 fixtures and 4 of them are at home. So that's quite encouraging. Whether or not he will play all those fixtures, we'll come on to that in a minute, but on paper, it looks good. Longer term than that, and you don't necessarily need to worry massively because game week 32 and beyond is what? When does that start? It's not till the 22nd of April, right? So it's a long way away, but this game could be a blank game week. If Man United beat Fulham in the FA Cup, that game would be off. It does mean it would be rearranged later, but it would probably get put into game week 37 where Chelsea would then have Man United away and Man City away. So it's not necessarily a great double, but again, game week 37 is in May, right? We don't need to worry about that right now. If you're looking in a free hit this week, then I think Chilwell becomes an excellent option because the next kind of 4 game weeks are decent. Then it's Brentford at home in 33. Arsenal away is not great in 34, but then after that it's Bournemouth away and Nottingham Forest at home. So you could get him in right now, and as long as he can stay fit, and that is a big question mark, he could be a long-term option, but also you could just have him up to 31 and then look to switch to someone like Trent Alexander-Arnold. So he's also a placeholder as well. So I think there's quite a lot of kind of pros towards going for him. The cons are obviously the fitness concerns because recently, and I'll just check I've actually got Chilwell selected here, he hasn't played many games this season. He was playing, he came back around game weeks 9, 11, etc. Wasn't able to play every single week, but then he was out again for a long time. He has started to prove his fitness more recently, and that is why I'm kind of more keen on him than Reece James. You know how much I love Reece James from an FPL point of view, but when we look at his recent games, he's only played in game week 23 against West Ham. He came off in the 59th minute against Fulham. He missed the Southampton game. He played 90 against Spurs. Then he's missed the last 2. Now, I think this one against Leeds and the one against Southampton were hamstring issues and Leicester was illness. But that is not that promising, right? That he's missed so many games recently. So I just worry about whether or not he can play so many games in quick succession. I also have the same concerns with Chilwell, but he has started proving his fitness a little bit more recently than Reece James. So this is on transfer market. So if you look at if we go all the way down to, where are we looking here? 73 minutes against Leicester, 90 against Leeds, 90 against Spurs, and 84 against Southampton. So that's quite encouraging. But I think what's even better is he's also playing the Champions League games. So he played 90 in the second leg against Dortmund, 71 in the first leg, and 90 against Dinamo Zagreb as well in the last game of the group stages. So he has played a lot of games, kind of 70 plus. And actually, look, if he gets brought off after the 60th minute but before the 90th, you don't really mind because of the clean sheets. And there's also that attacking potential as well. So I think that looks pretty good. I think the other thing for me is there's not really a huge amount of competition on the right or left for James and Chilwell when they're fit. I know people will say Cucurella, but Graham Potter doesn't really play him as a left wing back that often. So if they do bench Chilwell, they'd have to play someone else in that left wing back position, or they revert to a back 4. And I think while this back 5 is working, you'd think that will continue. And also, by the way, just one other thing, this Dortmund game was on a Tuesday, right after a Premier League game on Saturday, and that's the same thing that's going to happen in game week 29, right? Chelsea have got Saturday game against Villa, then a Tuesday game against Liverpool. Now, is there a risk that Chilwell doesn't play one of those games? Absolutely. I'm not saying this is a absolute banker where he's going to play every single week and get you attacking returns in every game and clean sheets, but I think it's encouraging that and I've said encouraging a lot now, that he's done it recently in Premier League and Champions League, and I think that Liverpool game you'll have to play, and the break between Everton and Villa is quite long. So unless he goes and gets loads of minutes with England in the international break, bearing in mind that Luke Shaw is probably still ahead of him in that team, I think he's a really good pick right now. And I think I'm going to find any way I can to get him into my team, even if that means altering my future transfer plans that I talked about before. If we look, just one last thing, if we look at his underlying data for the season, 0.11 expected goals per 90, 0.07 expected assists. Those numbers aren't better, but he is fully capable of doing better than that, because obviously he's missed a lot of games, so he's been in and out of the team, and he hasn't always been playing as a wing back as well. So I think those numbers are pretty good, but they can be a lot better, and I've got a lot of faith in him. So I do like Reece James. I don't think you need to panic if you've got him. As long as Potter says he's fit for the weekend, then he should be a good option. And arguably, when they're both fit, he's slightly better than Chilwell. But right now, Chilwell seems to be the fitter of the two. And he's doing really well. Love him as a left wing back. 5.9 million is a bit of a bargain as long as that continues. I can't see too many downsides other than will he play all those games? And when Champions League games come again, between 30 and 31 and 31 and 32, could he be rested there as well? There are some risks over the minutes still. All right, let's talk about the possibility of selling Erling Haaland in game week 28. And realistically, what could go wrong anyway? The guy's only owned by nearly every active FPL manager out there. He's only scored 27, 28 goals this season. You have to ask yourself, is he even that good, right? And every one of you individually can decide whether you think he's still a good FPL option or not. But obviously, all jokes aside, let's talk about why people are even thinking about it. So in game week 28, Man City literally have no fixture. He cannot punish you. The punishment starts in game week 29 instead, where they've got Liverpool at home. Now, I find Liverpool quite hard to analyse because they're a bit hit and miss. They keep a clean sheet against Man United, score 7 goals, then they lose 1-0 to Bournemouth. But ultimately, I've said for a while that their attack is better than their defence. So Haaland can definitely get points in that game in game week 29. And if Liverpool play any kind of a high line, then that is going to be bad news for anyone that doesn't own Haaland, because he's great at breaking in behind with the pace that he's got. So could he go and get 2 or 3 goals in that game? Absolutely. We know how good he is. Then it's Southampton away and Leicester at home in 31. In 32, that will almost certainly be a blank game week because only one of Brighton or Man City need to go through. And in 33, it's Arsenal at home. So even if you were comfortable going without him for Liverpool at home, you've then got to get him back for Southampton away and Leicester at home. Most people would want him for those fixtures at the bare minimum. So it's one fixture out, one fixture in. Now, if we discuss the player that a lot of people are thinking about bringing in, they would have to have a fixture in 28 and a double in 29. Otherwise, it just wouldn't be worth it whatsoever. And one player that's coming up quite a lot is Ollie Watkins. So he's got Bournemouth at home in 28, and then it's 2 away games in 29. I think it's Chelsea and Leicester, but I need to double check. Chelsea away and Leicester away. So he should play all of those fixtures, but obviously they're not that easy. It'd be much better if one of them was at home. So what you're saying is, let's say you definitely want Haaland back. 1 transfer out, 1 transfer in. Let's say they're worth about 4 points each. 8 points to get 2 extra fixtures from Watkins. Can he score more than 8 points than Haaland with 3 fixtures versus Haaland's 1 against Liverpool? Now, I think when we assess these kind of moves, we always think about the worst case scenario. So when we're picturing those moves, we are picturing Haaland scoring a hat-trick against Liverpool. I don't know how likely that is. I think if you said right now Haaland's going to get 10 points in that game, I would say, yeah, that's fair enough. So add that to the transfers you're making. Let's say that's 18. Can Watkins get 18 or more over 3 fixtures? Possibly, but there is some risk there, and you have to acknowledge that you're going to lose money on Haaland as well if you got him early. So for me, for example, it would cost 0.4 million to get him back. Now, he's already been sold by 167,000 FPL managers. I think that will continue to rise as we get towards the deadline. So he might drop in price, in which case it would only cost you 0.3 million to get him back. But that's also worth thinking about. So whether or not that's worth it, that's really completely up to you. It's perfectly fine to go into game week 28 with less than 11 players. It's perfectly fine to not have a team full of double game week players in 29. It's really up to you to make that decision. For what it's worth, at the time of recording, and I'm not going to commit to it, but at the time of recording, I still think I'm going to make that move. But part of it is because I also own Ivan Toney, and this was the plan from game week 26 wildcard anyway, and I just wonder if I've seen enough to alter that plan. So the idea would be to do Haaland to Watkins, get him for Bournemouth at home, and also bear in mind, not only do they have Bournemouth, I know the double's not great, but they have Bournemouth at home in 28 and Nottingham Forest at home in 30. Then it's another home game in 31, another one in 33 as well. So as a longer term pick, Watkins is pretty good, but obviously owning Ivan Toney is not without risk because he's only 2 yellow cards away from suspension, and obviously he has got this ban looming over him. So the closer we get to game week 30 onwards, I'm a little bit more worried about owning him. Now, if you get to game week 30 and there's no suspension, no bans on the horizon, obviously you can keep him. But it's not just about doing Haaland to Watkins and back again. It's Haaland to Watkins and then Toney back to Haaland to not have to deal with any issues there after the double in game week 29. So whether or not that's worth transfers again is really completely up to you. But that is why people are thinking about doing it. I did half jokingly talk about yesterday on Twitter whether or not we could just go without him until game week 34. Now that is massive risk because he can do damage in any of those games against Liverpool, Southampton and Leicester, but ultimately he's got a blank. I would hope that Liverpool will keep his score down a little bit. The blank in 32 almost certainly, and then Arsenal at home is not that great in 33, so it'd be going without him for Southampton away and Leicester at home. Now part of the problem there is in game week 30, I'm not sure there is a better captain than him. Like maybe Kane against Brighton at home, and probably not a Liverpool or Arsenal player because they're playing against each other. So you'd be backing Kane against Brighton at home instead of Haaland away to Southampton. That doesn't sound fun. But in game week 31, especially for those of you like me that don't have an overall rank that you're happy with, I'm already considering whether or not I own Haaland or not, going for Kane captain against Bournemouth instead of Haaland captain against Leicester and just taking that risk while I think the fixtures are both pretty good. But, again, I'm not sitting here telling you that is a smart move. And I ultimately think if I do sell him, I will probably just get him straight back because I don't want that hassle or the stress of having to watch Man City games without him. But that is why people are thinking about selling him and getting him back later on. You could go for someone like Havertz instead of Watkins. It doesn't have to be him, but that's what a lot of people are looking at. Or you could risk it and not have him until game week 34, but that is massively risky and he could keep going up in price, especially if he keeps getting decent points and people look to bring him back in. So let me know down in the comments below, are you thinking of selling Haaland this week and how sure are you about doing it? Because talking about it and doing it are two totally different things. So I have already mentioned Ollie Watkins a little bit in this video and he is quite popular this week for good reasons. So there will be a bit of a comparison here, but if you wanted to go different, you could consider Kai Havertz as an alternative because Chelsea also have a pretty good fixture in 28 followed by a double in 29. And in terms of the number of fixtures from 28 to 31, it's exactly the same for Aston Villa and Chelsea. Obviously, the quality of those fixtures matter, and we'll talk about that later, but there's not much to split them in terms of the number, and they're also both first choice penalty taker as well. Even when you look at their underlying expected data, they're both similar. So for Watkins, it's 0.39 expected goals per 90 versus 0.33 for Havertz. So Watkins slightly higher goal threat and he's played more minutes so far. For assists, so expected assists, it's 0.13 for Havertz and 0.11 for Watkins. So if you were picking on those numbers alone and they weren't going to change, you would say that Watkins is the slightly better pick, but obviously those numbers can change and that's not the whole story either. So Chelsea right now have gone through a stage since the World Cup and maybe for a lot of this season where they're not scoring a huge amount of goals. They've got a lot of games where it's either 0 or 1, but more recently, especially with this change to a back 3, they've been scoring more. They've been getting 2 or 3 a game, right? And if you think that trajectory is going to continue upwards for Chelsea, then why not look at someone like their number 9? He's also very much a differential compared to Watkins. So Watkins has been higher transferred in this week and his overall ownership was already at a higher level. And, you know, the closer we get to the end of the season, there's less weeks to make up points, especially if you're at an overall rank that you're not completely happy with. So if you genuinely think that Havertz and Watkins are very similar and you can't split them, you might choose to go for the one that's a bit different to climb the ranks. Likewise, some people might go for the one that's higher owned because they're already at a position they're happy with and they might want to stick there. Of course, you might want to go even higher and you can choose the differential, etc. It's just one thing to try and split them, right? And we have seen in the past that Havertz has had better underlying numbers than what he's showing right now. So I think with Chelsea attackers, you've almost got to have a bit of faith that this is an upward trajectory, not just for Chelsea in general, but also for them as FPL options. So I do like Havertz from that point of view. I think if you look at the fixtures, despite the fact that the next 3 for Chelsea are at home, I do think over the short to maybe medium, even longer term, they are slightly better for Aston Villa. So if we just come on here, you can see that Watkins slightly higher transferred in than Havertz so far this season. But you've got Bournemouth at home this week, compared to Everton at home for Chelsea. In the double, it is 2 home games for Chelsea versus 2 away for Aston Villa. So you probably would give 29 to Chelsea in that regard. I think the fact that Villa get to play Leicester is handy though, because that is not a good defence. But in game week 30, where Havertz has got Wolves away, Villa get to play Nottingham Forest at home, and then when Chelsea have got Brighton at home, Villa have got Newcastle at home. Now, you could say that Newcastle is a slightly harder fixture, but I don't think there's much in it, right? And they're both home games anyway. Then it's Brentford in 32, which will be a blank game week for some teams. So remember, Chelsea might blank that week, and then straight after it's Fulham at home. So if you're making a pick from now until 33, I would argue that Ollie Watkins is probably slightly better, but, and there is some advantages for Chelsea as well, if this game in 32 does get called off, it'll probably move into 37 and be a double. And outside of that, the single game week fixtures are pretty good. So it's Brentford at home in 33, Bournemouth away in 35, and Nottingham Forest at home in 36. So if you were free hitting in game week 32, you could argue that Havertz, and we're thinking long term here, 28 to 36, is probably slightly better, especially when you put the double in 37. Even though it's 2 hard fixtures, it's still 2 games that Havertz is going to get over Watkins with just 1. So I don't really have a huge amount to split the 2. Right now, at the time of recording, I think I'm probably going to go for Watkins over Havertz because I just don't think I can turn down Bournemouth and Nottingham Forest at home over the next 3 game weeks. And I also kind of want to leave my options open with game week 32. If I look at my transfers and decide I'm definitely free hitting that week, then maybe I'll get pushed towards Havertz. But if not, I do think I slightly prefer Ollie Watkins. The other player to talk about just quickly is João Felix, because his underlying data for the season is slightly higher than Havertz. The only benefit that Havertz has is penalties, really. You look at João Felix, 0.45 XG against Leicester. Leeds wasn't great, and I don't think any of them did well against Spurs. But outside of that, João Felix, when he's played, has looked really good. Even on the eye, I think he's probably been one of their better attackers. So you could look at him as well, but I think if I was going for a Chelsea attacker, I would take the penalty taker instead. And also, his minutes are great. The only game he's missed, Havertz this is now, is Southampton. That wasn't a great game for Chelsea anyway. And outside of that, in 5 of the last 6 matches, he's played 90 minutes. So I don't think minutes are really a concern with him. And I don't think anyone like Aubameyang is suddenly going to be back in the team or anything like that. So I really like Havertz. I just don't know if you can say he's an outright better option than Watkins. But if you want to go a bit different, if you think Chelsea are on the rise and you want to be a part of that, Havertz could be the better pick for your team. And lastly, let's take a look at Gabriel Martinelli. Nearly 90,000 transfers in already this week. Now, it is worth mentioning, because it's a blank game week, some people will be using their free hit chips. And the transfers in and transfers out don't differentiate between those that are free hitting or not. But we're just going to assume that some people are looking to bring him into their actual team. And to be fair, even though Arsenal don't have any double game weeks left, which also means they've got no blank game weeks either, their single game weeks are pretty good. So they've got Crystal Palace at home in 28, Leeds at home in 29. Liverpool away is not necessarily an ideal fixture, but defensively they're still a bit suspect, I would say. And Arsenal are fully capable of getting a goal or 2 in that game. And I think given the fixtures around it, it just wouldn't put me off that much. Then it's West Ham away and Southampton at home. Now, obviously, even if you haven't got chips, you have got transfers. So you could bring in players with a double in 29 and look to remove them before the blank game weeks in 32. But if you do want players that you can just hold the whole way through, Arsenal still look pretty good from that reason. So the only issue potentially with Martinelli is his minutes. Now, a lot of us did Martinelli to Odegaard a few weeks ago, and it hasn't really worked out whatsoever. I think partly that was helped for Martinelli owners because Nketiah picked up that knock, which meant Trossard came in. And I think even though on paper it's been lining up as Martinelli on the left, Trossard central, and Saka on the right, Trossard does tend to drift, especially to that left-hand side, which allows Martinelli to come a bit more central. And I think we saw that way more often when Gabriel Jesus was fit versus when Nketiah was fit. So I would say from that perspective, it has made Martinelli a better option, but I do worry about the fact that Jesus is now back and starting to build up his fitness. I think in the short term, at least game week 28, it's very unlikely he starts. But from 29 onwards, we just don't know. And it could absolutely be, as I said in the free hit video, Martinelli on the left, Jesus central, and Saka on the right. But Trossard is always there to take minutes off of someone. Now, for a while, that might be off of Jesus because Arteta doesn't want to risk him. So even if Jesus starts, he might come off around the 65th, 75th minute or something like that. So I think in the short term, maybe definitely 28, maybe 29, possibly even game week 30, because I think Martinelli's pace up against Trent Alexander-Arnold will be kind of key for how Arsenal play that game. I think Martinelli is good, but as a long-term move, I do just worry a little bit about his minutes. So I think if you're looking to bring him in, just kind of determine at what point you might want to get rid of him or at what point he might become an issue for you. And I don't think it's a case that Odegaard has suddenly become a bad option. I know Martinelli, since we did the switch, has outscored him, but going forward, Odegaard's underlying numbers are still pretty good. So for Martinelli, it's 0.29 expected goals per 90, 0.23 expected assists. And if we look at Odegaard's recent games, like 0.45 XG here, 0.56 against Bournemouth, 0.4 against Everton. These are still pretty good numbers. And even in games where it's a bit lower, like Villa, his expected assists are also quite high. So I know it's boring, but I still think if I was picking an Arsenal player for the long term, I would go for Odegaard. For 28, 29, maybe 30, I'm sure Martinelli will be fine. But I think in his own right, Odegaard is still a good pick, and he's absolutely nailed, and his minutes are fantastic as well. So that is still where I would go, but I'm fully expecting as an Odegaard owner to lose out to Martinelli over the next couple because he's just brilliant. So let me know if you're bringing in an Arsenal player this week, why that is, and also which one you're going to go for. Leave me a comment below about any of the players I've discussed in this video. Are you going to get rid of Haaland? I think I am. We'll see. I'll talk about it more in team selection. If you've enjoyed that video, make sure to give it a like. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and I'll catch you again soon.